Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Patibodhitam the Gita Dhyanam, I just did it twice quietly today. I don't know, I just wanted to do that. So we'll, hopefully you could also do it. Let's do the 5 verses from the 8th chapter. Starting with verse number 5. So 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9. So let's chant those. And so I will chant it twice. First time you can just listen to me, and then hopefully you will also chant along with me. So chapter 8, number 5. Antakale cha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram. Antakale cha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram. Yaf prayati sadmadbhavam yati nasti atra samshayaha. Yaf prayati samadbhavam yati nasti atra samshayaha. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajyatyante kalevaram. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajyatyante kalevaram. Tam tam evaiti kaunteya sada tadabhava bhavitaha. Tam tam evaiti kaunteya sada tadbhava bhavitaha. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam manusmara yudhya cha. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmara yudhya cha. Mayi arpitamano buddhihi Mame vaishyasya samshayam. Mayi arpitamano buddhihi Mame vaishyasya samshayam. Adhyasa yoga yuktena cetasa nanyagamina. Abhyasa yoga yuktena cetasa nanyagamina. Paramam purusham divyam yati parthamanu Paramam purusham divyam yati parthanu chintayan. Kavim puranam manushasitaram ano aniyan samanudyaretyaha. Kavim Puranam Anushasitaram Ano Aniyan Samanutsmaredyaha Sarvasya Dhataram Achintya Rupam Aditya Varnam Tamasaf Parastat Sarvasya Dhataram Achintya Rupam Aditya Varnam Tamasaf Parastat. Okay. If you can please forgive me, I'm just going to go get a glass of water, okay? I'll be right back. Okay, so the 8th chapter begins by Arjuna asking 7 questions from Sri Krishna, and Sri Krishna answers that starting with verse number 3. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Aksharam Brahma Paramam, etc. So 6 of those questions, which were technical aspects of Akshara Brahman, we went through last class. Okay? The 7th question that Arjuna had asked was in the 2nd verse, and it says, Prayana kale chakatham gyeyosi niyanatmabhihi. This was the 7th question. Prayana kale chakatham gyeyosi niyata atmabhihi. So this is in fact the main subject matter of this chapter, and that is Prayana Kale. Prayana Kale means towards the end of one's life. How should we know you? And how should we know you who are already familiar with who you are to a large extent, but we don't know you as well as we should? And what is the benefit of knowing you as well as we should? So all of those questions relating to the end of the life and transitioning into the next life are being talked about in this question. So this is the question from Arjuna, which now we begin to answer in this part of in fact this is the main part of the 8th chapter, which has to do with towards the end of our life. Okay, so here he begins by answering that in the 5th verse, which we chanted before. Antakalecha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram yaf prayati samadbhavam yati nasti atra samshayah. So he says that the one who gives up his life, his or her life, thinking about me, actually reaches me. So this is what we have to really examine and understand, and really very beautiful section of the Bhagavad Gita. And here Swami Paramarthananda had pointed out very clearly, in fact, it's the implied meaning of this chapter, but he clearly brought it out for discussion and for thinking. And what he said was this: the entire Bhagavad Gita, as the epitome of Advaita Vedanta, is devoted to an understanding of moksha achieved in this life itself. So is the Mukti Shastra, a complete freedom from all problems. This is what he was talking about. And so this is what the Bhagavad Gita is entirely devoted to. However, it is very possible, even likely, that most of us may not be able to get to that moksha in this life itself. In that case, what should be done? So this is what is called the moksha in this life, as what is called Jivan Muktaha. Muktaha means one who's free while alive. Jivan Muktaha. Jivan eva Muktaha. Jivan is the present participle, which means while living, one is free. This is the main topic of the Bhagavad Gita. This is also called Sadhyo Muktihi. Sadhyo Moksha. Sadhyo means right now, not later. I'm done. This is the promise of Vedanta. This is the promise of Sanatana Dharma. This is the promise of Bhagavad Gita. So this is one thing. Then there is always a question that I know I want that, but if I am not able to get to that point, which is really most of an understanding of what mukti is, my mukti is not because I am not mukta. This one we should also know this as students of Vedanta, that the mukti, the moksha that we speak of is praptasya praptihi. It is not as though it's not there with me now and I will get it later. That's not what it is. It means that I have it, but I just don't know it. So as we have talked about it, even in the recent new class that I started, that it is praptasya prapti. It is an acquisition of the already acquired. Nevertheless, one can say this question can be transformed into, okay, I see what you're saying, but I still don't know it clearly enough. I don't understand it. And if my life ends before I am able to clearly understand it, then what? So Swami Paramarthananda has pointed out that the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, one out of the 18 chapters, is actually devoted to Krama Mukti, not Sadhyo Mukti. Krama Moksha. Krama Moksha means sequential, not right away. And so this is the only chapter in the whole Bhagavad Gita where, in case you have not been able to understand it in this life, Sri Krishna says, here is what the process will be. And so this is a very interesting thing. We have to really see this, and we will look into that today in great detail. So that's exactly what the first answer of Sri Krishna to Arjuna's question, that what happens prayana kale ta katham jnyosi niyatatma bhihi. He says, I am devoted to you. Not that I am not, and we'll go into that in a minute. What do you mean by I am devoted to you? So he says, I am devoted to you, but I'm not there yet. So what is it how will I know you, and what is going to happen to me? That's all of those questions are included in that question. And so the answer to that on verse number 5 was, Antakale cha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram. Kalevaram means the physical body. The physical body is called kalevaram. Not the sukshma sharira, but the sthula sharira is called kalevaram. Sukshma sharira is not given up from life to life. As long as you are a jiva from life to the other, sukshma sharira, software, stays with you. But the hardware keeps changing. So this is exactly what happens. You have, Windows version 10 that you paid Microsoft for installing into your desktop, let's say. And it was all functioning well, everything was going well. Suddenly you have a hardware crash, and you find out that this hardware cannot function anymore. What to do? So now you have to buy a brand new computer. And when you buy a brand new computer, so the hardware has to be changed. But you've already paid for version 10 of Windows. Now it is all by subscription, as you know. So you've already paid for that. So there is a very easy method. The same software that you had, and hopefully your data also, can be transferred over to the new hardware. This is exactly what happens in the case of human beings. And so the software is ours. So this is what is called the internal wealth. And the body and all the other things, relationships with other people, children, family, bank accounts, this is all hardware. All relationships and the body relationships and so on is all hardware. Those are all given up. But the software remains intact. And what do you mean by software? The software means your way of thinking, your way of accepting, of tolerating or not tolerating, either way, both negative and positive. Your sense of impatience, of unforgiveness, jealousy, all those negative tendencies that you have spent a lifetime of. Remember, we went through this in the definition of karma. One of the questions that Arjuna had was karma. And we went through this in some more detail. And what it said was that each one of us is at this point based on all my previous thinking and my previous actions, not only thinking but the actions. And so all of those which leave a certain wake, W-A-K-E, wake in their behind them. This is what Swami Chinmayananda used to call vasana, and it is true. And so the word vasana is a negative one and samskara is a positive one. But impressions nevertheless. So all the impressions of my previous life. And so it's a continuous process, by the way. It is not herky-jerky. You may have some event that happened very suddenly, but most of the time it's a continuous process where your thinking, your background, your actions, your results all flow towards the point that you are in now. And what is being said here, this is an interesting thing that is being pointed out by Sri Krishna, that this process where your software, which is an accumulation of all the previous actions and so on, and bring you up to this point, this does not change drastically when you leave this life. It doesn't. All remains the same. Now, the fact of the matter is that the body cannot be used again. That because either through disease or through old age or through accident, for whatever reason, the hardware has broken. But the software remains the same. And the software slowly undergoes changes. And so please remember that. And now we will go into the software business in a minute, just to make sure that the continuation of this teaching is done. But this is the fundamental point, that the Krama Mukti means sequential mukti, requires a continuous improvement in the purity of your thoughts, which we have been discussing all along, which is the refinement of your thinking. And the refinement of the thinking means, as we have said it before even in the earlier part of the 8th chapter, presents itself in a sequence. And the sequence is as follows. In a very brief manner, the sequence is that first of all, you don't think of the influence or presence of Ishvara in your life, of God in your life. You don't. Because you're dealing with the world as it is, and however best you can deal with it, you're dealing with it. Okay? Then, and this is where the advantage of having some problems in life come in. So problems means some pain and suffering is a trigger for you to now change your thinking. You know, Swami Dayanand used to say that pain and suffering is a very integral part of our lives. And if it was not there, we will not be making progress. So for instance, even if you look at the physical body, Ishvara has given us the pain as a very positive aspect of leading our life. So if you were to say, what? Pain as a positive aspect? How? Well, supposing you are heating something on your stove, and so there is a pan, and you are not aware of the fact that there is in fact the fire is underneath the pan. It doesn't show the fire, and you touch it. If the pain of touching a hot pan is not there, your whole hand will get destroyed, isn't it? So think of it this way: when you touch the hot pan, pain is a blessing to you. In fact, the sooner you react to it, otherwise you just keep touching it for a while, and then the pain takes its own while. About 1 minute later, too late. Your hand will become the Indian pauper. It's useless. You have to throw it away. The pain is a very important element of progress, of protection. Same thing with emotional pain. When you have some emotional pain in your life, leave aside the physical pain, then it is an invitation to investigate. So similarly, for example, supposing you have some unexplained, the touching of the pan is very simple. Anybody can recoil from it. Excuse me. But supposing you have some issue with your health, and until the symptoms occur, I mean, this is what happens in some of the late stage cancers. Some of our friends we have seen. There was a friend of ours who had a ovarian cancer. And the interesting thing was, it didn't show up as a symptom for a long time until it was pretty late. And she's still battling. So, if there is unless there is some symptom, unless there is some pain, you cannot correct it. So similarly, in emotional pain, it is an invitation for one to take corrective actions. Why am I having it? Is it my problem or somebody else's problem? And oftentimes you find is that it is really not your problem, it's somebody else's problem. What you find is that this is part of the weakness of our mental thinking. I mean, not mental thinking, but thinking. That sometimes you feel that people are being rude to you because you're not worth it. And they're not rude to others. Why are they rude to you? That means that you're something wrong with you. No. It turns out that it is some problem with the other person. You're okay. So, an investigation into some emotional issue also is an invitation to improve things. Anyway, this is what is meant by the software Shuddhi. So you become more pure through applications, through thinking, through analyzing, and then you do that. So anyway, going back to the stages of the development of the human being, one stage is where God doesn't enter into the picture at all. You're just dealing with situations as they occur, and hopefully you will be okay. And if the problems occur, which is a blessing, problems should be seen as an invitation for correction, and as such it's a blessing. You may start to look into the presence of Ishvara in your life. What is the role? To what extent is there a presence of this subtle factor called God? And if you were to investigate that and you become devoted to it, you enter into the second phase of your development. In this second phase, the characteristic is you are a person looking for help, and you consider Ishvara to be a helpful factor in your life. And so this results in keeping a certain shraddha, a certain faith in the presence of this subtle factor called God, and you can actually, your attitudes, your actions, the way you conduct your life is very much in recognition of the presence of Ishvara. So every time you go to a temple or you pray at home and you have a little picture of or murti of something or of Christ and cross or whatever, then you have something which is not worldly. You're always dealing with worldly issues, but you also have a third factor where God becomes a presence in your life. Okay, so this is phase number 2. So this is what is called upasana or bhakti. So the upasana means you're thinking of not just dealing with the things around you, but also with God. This is the upasana, this is the bhakti. This is stage 2. In the stage 2, the upasana first goes through Sakama Bhakti. Sakama Upasana. I'm just revising it. It's not as though I have not talked about it. You should be aware of that in the previous classes. So the second stage is Sakama Bhakti, where you ask for specific results, whatever they are. You can even say, please make me happy. May my problems go away. Or you can be more specific. I want my family to be healthy. I want my son or a daughter to pass the exam. May you protect me from COVID. All those kinds are specific requests with specific ends in mind. And so please remove obstacles. You go to the Ganesha temple, etc. Or you go to the Sankatamochana temple and you pray to Hanuman. All those kinds are Sakama Bhakti. And they're very beautiful compared to what you didn't even think about it. Pretty soon you find that your entire mental makeup is now introduced to a third factor which is very helpful to you. And this is called Sakama Bhakti. But now we go to the third stage, which is Nishkama Bhakti. 3 stages. No Bhakti, Sakama Bhakti, Nishkama Bhakti. So Nishkama Bhakti means what? Nishkama Bhakti is the real Bhakti. How? So the Sakama Bhakti, if we were to compare this to, let's say that one has an accident and one breaks an ankle. This example comes very clearly in my mind because a friend of ours, we saw him a couple of years ago, and he was on crutches. So we asked him what happened. He says, "Oh, please don't even ask." He says, "So stupid." So what happens is that he has a dog, and he walks around in the evening with the dog leashed. And so this one day he was just walking with the dog with the leash. Now one of the characteristics of dogs is that when they see other human beings, they of course sometimes bark, and they're supposed to bark and so on. But if they see another dog, they become haywire. They become, something strange happens to them. They just either cannot tolerate them or they are very attracted to them. And so their actions are much more sudden when they see another dog. He says, "Sir, this is what happened to me. I was just walking around, just looking at my emails on my cell phone or something, and I had the dog in the leash. And all of a sudden the dog just just jerked me because there was another dog close by, and I fell down and I broke my ankle. Anyway, that was just, that's what the example came to my mind. But if a person breaks the ankle, then the doctor says, oops, I can give you some, I can bind it up and so on, but you have to get a, you have to really put something underneath your armpits, so you cannot just walk around without crutches. You have to have crutches. So the person says, okay. In fact, when I saw him, he was on crutches. We get the crutches. Then, supposing this happens, and I tell you I have an example from India, because if some distant relative had asked for some, it was not a crutch, it was something else, some medical device. And then they said, you know, there is a better medical device available in the West. Can you please send that? And so you can get that from Amazon. And this one means that the crutches are more padded. The other one was wooden and it was jerky and so on. This one has more padded. And so you get better crutches. Better crutches. Okay? And supposing this is not healing, you keep on getting some more help to do that. So Sakama Bhakti is like improving your crutches. Nishkama Bhakti is not asking for another set of crutches, but not to need crutches at all. So this one comes from, of course, in the crutches case, it's very simple, very understandable. But in the case of one's sense of freedom, the understanding that my freedom is innate to me, but I don't have it, I need that freedom. That innate freedom that I have, which is not my experience at the moment, I want that kind of a freedom. Just a temporary freedom because of solving life's problem is not enough for me. Because I see them, in fact, this is what happens. You know, this is in Vedanta, this is said, that most of us are not even aware of the fact that we don't have freedom. It's a very funny situation. Supposing you were to just ask randomly some person and says, I want to ask you about freedom, your own personal freedom. Are you free or not? How is he going to answer that? He'll say, are you crazy? Don't you see I am not in a jail? And I live in this free country called United States, where there is a lot of personal freedom, or India. I am not in Russia or China or one of those places where my life is governed by so much. I'm free. And if you tell them, sir, you are not free, he thinks you are the crazy one and he's the sane one. So our definition of freedom is so loose. Just the fact that I am not in a jail and I can the police is not after me, I think I'm free. So Vedanta says for a general person, we don't even know that we are not free. How are we not free? Okay, you want me to start? Okay, you have a paper and pencil? Please sit down and write everything. Okay? the first lack of freedom is hunger and thirst. So people will say, oh, well, there's nothing wrong with that. What do you mean that? It's fun to eat and so on and so forth. It is not fun to eat unless you have plenty to eat. You can just go to the local Safeway, get the food, and just cook it, or just get ready-made food. No problems. What if you don't have any money? You cannot buy food. What if you are stranded someplace away from it? How long are you going to stay? Then you'll say, oh, that's a good point. Yeah, you're right. The problem is most of us eat without being hungry. Before we even get hungry, we just say, oh, it's time for dinner. We never let hunger even approach us. Hunger and thirst is a lack of freedom. Okay? Then how you spend your time, you're not free. There are so many demands on it. People say, oh, you haven't done this, you haven't done that. You have to go to office. You have just a couple of weekends. So the list of non-freedom is just amazing. So therefore, Sakama Bhakti has to transition to Nishkama Bhakti, where you say, I was not aware of the fact that I am not free. Now I'm aware of it and I want to be free. Is there a way for me to be free, even from the hunger and thirst? That inquiry, that sense of inquisitiveness is the final one, which is the third stage, which is called Nishkama Bhakti. And so, in the Nishkama Bhakti, it means this is the spiritual growth. So what do you mean by spiritual growth? What we mean by spiritual growth is Shraddha towards Praptasya Prapti. Because this is just an amazing statement by the Shastra. You are already free and you don't understand it. Either the Shastra has had too much alcohol and it doesn't know what it's talking about, or it's trying to fool me, or it's trying to tell me something that I don't yet understand but I need to understand. This is called spiritual growth. It requires patience. It requires a certain level of wisdom. Wisdom here means not intelligence, but so when we become adults from children, some kind of a wisdom grows. Children are also intelligent many times. They have better memory than you and I do, but they don't yet have wisdom. And they will come. Similarly, for people who are spiritually a child, don't yet have the wisdom. But if you persist in the spiritual growth, that wisdom slowly seeps into you. So now we can begin this section of the Bhagavad Gita where we look into the third stage, which is Nishkama Bhakti. Nishkama Bhakti. So, when we go back to the verse number 5, Antakalacha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram. He says that if at the time of death, the time of death meaning when you give up your relationship with the body, if you were to do that, then at that time, mam eva smaran. Mam eva smaran means, may you think about me. What do you mean by think about me? What does it really mean? So what it means is that you have entered into phase 3. Hopefully you have entered into phase 3. If you have not yet entered into phase 3, and you are still in phase 2, where it is Sakama Bhakti, then also you can remember me as a karma phaladata, as the giver of your fruit. There is some system behind the scenes that never lets karma and karma phaladata happen accidentally. It's also a continuous process of karma and phala. And it just because of the death, it doesn't stop. As we said before, all that happens is that you I think this is one of the issues that one of the remembrances that we should be aware of is, there is very little difference between deep sleep and death. Very little difference. So in the case of deep sleep, your disassociation with your body-mind complex is absolute. But there is still a seed which will allow that association to reappear the moment you wake up in the morning. And in the case of death, that severance between you and the body is permanent. That's gone. You have to you have to get another body. Get brand new mothers and fathers to give you birth. And it all happens. It's taken care of and all of that. But it has to happen. So that's all. So in the stage 2 also you have a faith and shraddha that this is a complete system. So this is what is called Saguna Brahma. So Saguna Brahma means that Ishvara with all of his Maya Shakti and the laws of governing changes from one life to the other are still intact. And you say, you know what, I am leaving, so let me think about the next Ishvara. I mean the next life as part of the Ishvara. So this can be done in number 2 also. But if you were to have already transitioned into phase 3 in this life, so phase 3 means a determination that I want spiritual growth. I want no crutches at all. I want to be healthy. I'm tired of getting better and better crutches. Then things happen. And so this whole process of what things happen and how they happen when you are in phase 3, this is what is called Krama Mukti. And this is what is talked about in the rest of this chapter. So let's now get into it. So, number 6. So in the second line of verse number 5, 1.2 note, Yaf prayati samadbhavam. So one who, madbhavam means thinking of the continuity of life as has been designed by me. So you are part of a law. You're not lost and saying, I don't know, I'm now dying and I don't know what's going to happen to me. Where am I going? And who's taking care of it? I am just, so this can be done. But if you already have taken your steps towards recognizing the role of Ishvara in the conduct of multi-lives and so on, you don't have those feelings. Yeah, you're sad to leave your family, no doubt about it. That is always painful. You're saying the final goodbye and so on. But at the same time, you are now thinking of something higher towards a relationship with Ishvara. So this is an important thing for us to see. So let's talk in terms of the relationships and dependency. So when you are brought into this life, it is with a sense of love, because somebody wanted you, and you as a baby is something that they are very pleased with, as it just recently happened to my son who just had a baby girl. And to see them really happy and welcoming this baby into their lives is a very beautiful thing to see. But if you look at it from a baby's standpoint, the baby is now well taken care of. Somebody who's taking care of their sleep, their diaper change, their milk, and all of that. So the baby is taken care of. And pretty soon the baby will recognize the relationships of the mother and father, how important they are, how helpful they are. And then the rest of then they will have other brothers and sisters, they'll have friends, they will go to school, family members, and so on and so forth. And then the whole thing will become a sense of relationship. And they are, for most part, happy with all of that. Then comes towards the latter part of the life where you become more their problems, your own body problems, your mental problems, and you are still attached to the people, and you are now receding. You're getting old, you're getting sick, you're getting old, and things are breaking down, and you now long for the relationships. And the end of the life is very painful in that sense, because they cannot help you. You need the help and you cannot get that. And there is a sense of loneliness and all of that. This is what happens. But suppose you have spent some time in building relationship with the real person who gave you birth. And that is Ishvara. Your father and mother were proxy Ishvaras. Because Ishvara cannot personally, unless you are a Krishna and Rama avatara, there also that somebody has to deliver them for Ishvara. Ishvara cannot directly be your father and mother. It has to go through some other people. That's the proxy mother and father. But the real person who's designed this whole thing, who is really your relation, he is your creator. So this is what we have to understand. We may be transitionally related to our local friends and families, But our real relationship is one which is unchanging, which is the Ishvara. And so what it means is that you have to discover that. And you have to discover that with logic. With logic, with yukti. Not only, not as we have said in the previous class also, that there are three filters that we have to go through. Shruti, yukti and anubhava. So Shruti means the authority, because you can check, hey, this appears to me to be the case. Is it really the case? And the Shruti will say, yeah, that's the right way to look at it. That's the right way to look at it. Yukti means that it makes sense to me. And so you find that there are people born with problems. Physical problems, and people born with no problems. And is this arbitrary? And so no, yukti means that there must be some karma and karma phala, must be some order. We find there is order all around the world. The water always boils at 100 degrees per centigrade. The sun always comes at the prescribed time during the season. So there is order everywhere. Is there no order in how people are born? That cannot be. There must be order. And so this is what is called niyata. So in fact, this is interesting. I just remembered this. Look at this in verse number 2. The word niyata is used. Prayana kale cha katham jnyosi niyata atmabhihi. Niyata atmabhihi. That means that an orderly one who understands niyata, who understands the order of Ishvara, the order of life. And so for that person who has already looked into the relationship with Ishvara, then what happens? If you remember the person who is in charge of you, because the rest of the people now are helpless. They can't help you. Your son is crying because the father is dying, and it says, Father, I wish I could help you. This is the experience that we have in family members. We just had a Zoom call with all of the family for my brother-in-law, Narendra. And people were saying that they were so impressed by him. He was such a powerful man. But towards the end of the life, they couldn't help him. He had some disease, and he ultimately succumbed to it. So they were helpless. So the people cannot help you. Is there nobody that can help you? It's not true, because the Creator alone is the relationship which is permanent with me. All the other relationships are temporary. They are like in a play. Or in fact, Swami Dayananda used to say that. It's exactly like, you are traveling in a train. And as you are traveling, the train stops at a particular station, and new family gets on. Some people, husband, wife, and a couple of kids, and they occupy the seat next to you. And now you are together for the next few hours. You share things with them, and they give you their food, you give them their food, your food, and you discuss all these things and so on. And then in the middle of the night, you wake up and this family is gone. They had really a small journey. You are still continuing on, and they've disappeared. They did not even say goodbye to you, even though at one time you were very friendly to them for a while. This is exactly what happens in our life. So each life is a journey, and we are connected to our children and our friends for a while. They are fellow travelers in our in our train of life, but we get separated. In fact, it is said that when I welcomed, every time I welcome a grandchild, I have three grandchildren, and I remember it. I just did this recently. When I talk to them, I say, I am so glad you chose us as the family to come to. You had, just like these airlines people say, they say, thank you for choosing United Airlines. We know you have a lot of choices, but we appreciate your business. So similarly to that, I can take my grandchildren. I am sure that you had a number of options that you were considering to be born into. And I am very happy that you chose the Kapoor family to be born into. And that means you expect us to take good care of you, and we will. So thank you for coming into our lives. Now, we don't know what the person was before she was born into our life as a baby. We have no idea where she's been. She's been through so many different lives before, had seen so many different families. And at what age she died before, we have no idea. It's a complete stranger. All of a sudden you find that the little embryo has a heart and is beating and is now a baby to be born. That's it. Now you are together for a while. And similarly, when a person dies, we have no idea where he's going. No idea. But you know what? Ishvara has an idea. Why? Because that relationship is permanent. It is not transitory. And so, Krishna says that if you are fortunate enough to know me and consider me as a relationship through the understanding of the Shastra, because it cannot be just all of a sudden, because you'll have so many doubts. Well, where is God? I don't know. There's no system or anything like this. But if you were to rely on the Shruti and also do the Yukti along with the Shruti, you will see, no, there cannot be, there is an order, there is niyata. And who is the controller of the order? I want that relationship. So once that is done, then how should you conduct the last portions of your life? And so that's what he's talking about. Antakalacha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram yaf prayati sa madbhavam yati nasti atra samshaya. So this is what I was talking about, and I went into a big loop, but I didn't finish this. So in the second line he says, Na asti atra samshaya. He says, there is no doubt in my mind. If you want to question it and you have doubts, it's up to you. But let me tell you, I'm not in the business of saying something that that's not truthful. This is what Ishvara himself is saying. This is the specialty of the Bhagavad Gita. Because here, the Ishvara in the form of Sri Krishna is addressing us directly. It doesn't say, please read the following books and so on. He says, I am telling you, there is no doubt that when you leave your life thinking of me, you reach me. Is that clear or not? They don't need to doubt. And you cannot say, well, where does it say that? And how come it's not true? What if it's not true? Okay, all right, you be on your own. So it says, that's up to you. But for me to assure you, this is, I'm not playing around. This is a fact. Okay? This is the tone that Sri Krishna is using. And then he seconds it by saying, in number 6, Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajanti ante kalevaram tam tam eva eti kaunteya sada tad bhava bhavitaha. So that's also just a continuation of number 5. He says that yam yam vapi smaran bhavam. This is an interesting thing to see. Okay? Because going back to the question of na atra samshaya, let there be no doubt. Because you can say, really? How is that? Are you sure? What if it doesn't occur? So Krishna gives you a reason for accepting his promise that there is no doubt about it. And what is that? He says, Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam. He says, in fact, what happens is, not just at the time of death. You look at the general rule that whatever you desire, ultimately you will reach that. This is a general rule. That's what his general rule is saying. He says, Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajati ante kalevaram tam tam eva eti. Eti means it reaches. Tam tam eva eti kaunteya. He kunti putra, he kaunteya sada sadbhava bhavitaha. He says whatever. So this is the process of karma. And so this is exactly what he says. Look at the general rule. It's not just only applicable at the time of death. The death simply continues the general rule. And what is the general rule? That however you conduct your life, you're moving towards it. Tats sada tad bhava bhavitaha. So here Swami Paramarthananda had given a very beautiful, I had seen this somewhere, but to see it quoted at this point is really interesting. He says, I noted it down from his notes. He says that as a person thinks, so a person becomes. And it is a very, very powerful law, which is a fact. It is not a law applicable only after death, but it is a law applicable within this life itself, which is, as a person thinks, so he or she becomes. And now look at the transformation of this proverb. He quoted this proverb, Swami Paramarthananda did, and I've borrowed that from him. He says, look at this. Watch your thoughts, because they become the words. Watch your words, because they become your actions. Watch your actions, because they become your habit. Watch your habits, because they become your character. watch your character, because it becomes your destiny. Just wonderful, so truthful, something we should relate to. How thoughts transition into words, into actions, into habits, about our culture, about our character, and eventually through the destiny. This is how it is in this life. And all that Krishna is saying is that death doesn't really interrupt it. This phenomena is universal. In fact, it punctuates the doubt that we have that my life is ending? Is it all finished? Nothing is finished. You just have to get a brand new body, but the whole thing continues. So the development of your destiny continues through your thoughts, through your actions, and all of that. Anyway, it's getting late. I will pick up the thread in the next class, and very interestingly enough, there is a normal thought that comes in. Okay, I accept thinking about God at the last minute. But here's what I'll do. Right now I don't have the time to think about God, because I'm just too busy. I know God is important and all that, but you know what? I've got a life to lead. And I've got kids, I have mouths to feed. I don't know about God. But if I am close to death, I'll now switch over and start thinking about God at that point. Okay, I accept it, and this is what my plan will be. Krishna says, no, this is not going to work. You cannot cheat me like this. And you don't cheat yourself like this. This plan is faulty. So we will discuss that aspect of that in the next class. And so with that I say a small prayer and then end this class. Om Asato Ma Satkamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Nirvishishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Person called Subhash Shah. This is a new name to me. I would appreciate if you could send me an email introducing yourself to me, vijaykapoor@gmail.com. I'd much appreciate it. I think all the other names I'm familiar with, and happy you could join us for this. I think this will be an enjoyable and very informative chapter to look at, as look forward to really unfolding it with you. So very happy that you were here, and I'll wait for another minute or so to see if you had any questions. There don't appear to be any, so with that I say goodbye to you, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Om.